Hi, everyone. Good evening to everyone. On behalf of JMU Alumni Association and Black Alumni Chapter, welcome alumni, family, and friends to our first homecoming, or I should say, I think our second homecoming event. So happy homecoming to everybody. Yay, go Dukes. Let's say it, go Dukes for a change. Everybody unmute, if we can unmute, and we can do go Dukes for at least once before we get started.
Dukes.
Go, ready?
Go Dukes.
Go
Dukes.
Dukes.
Thank you. So welcome to Black in the Days. My name is Paula Bowens, and I am the Black Alumni Chapter President. And we hope you will enjoy this evening as you will hear from us from our experience expanding over 50 years. Just a little bit of housekeeping. We can't see you, the audience that is out there, but if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A and we will respond to them later in the event. So with that, before we introduce the panel, we have a guest, and our guest is President Alger. I just want to read a little bit of his bio, and then President Alger will come on, give a brief speaking, and then we'll introduce the panel. So President Alger, Jonathan Alger is the president of James Madison University, a public comprehensive university in Virginia with 2,200 students. Under his leadership, JMU has developed a new vision to be the national model of the engaged university, engaged with ideas and the world. A strategic plan focused on engaging learning, community engagement, and civic engagement. President Alger is nationally recognized scholar and a speaker on higher education law and policy issues, such as civic engagement, free speech, and diversity. And if you want to learn more information about President Alger, please go on to our website. And I will now introduce President Alger.
Thank you, Paula. Good evening, everybody. It's great to see you all. This is such a different way to do homecoming, isn't it? But, you know, we're making the best of the circumstances and the technology, and I really appreciate everybody joining us tonight for this special event. I do, as we get started, want to thank the staff from the Office of Alumni Relations, especially during this homecoming week. They've been finding some really creative ways to keep us connected. So a shout out to the staff, and really pleased that we can still be together even in this kind of environment. As you know, it's a very special program that we've got going for this evening. As you heard, we're going to be reflecting on these past 50 years at JMU, and you're going to hear some special stories from people about their own personal experiences and perspectives. And I do want to especially welcome a couple of folks. Our very first female African-American graduate, Sherry Darkus Johnson, class of 1970. Thank you, Sherry. It's so good to see you again. We're so glad to have you with us. And, you know, this is when I'm supposed to be putting that Bluestone medallion around you, so we'll have to find a time to do that. So congratulations on 50 years as an alum. And then our first male African-American graduate, Jim Rankin, is also with us. I think I saw Jim earlier. Where is he? If you're there, Jim, if you could give a wave, or at least we saw you out there earlier. And again, he'd be celebrating his 50th anniversary of graduation in 2021, so during this academic year. So really, what an honor, Sherry and Jim, to have both of you with us tonight. I do want to acknowledge and recognize, of course, the Black Alumni Chapter, which is also celebrating an anniversary. I guess happy anniversary is the theme of the night here, 30 years as a formal organization at JMU. And we are grateful to all of you for your leadership and your support and the many ways in which you have enriched and continue to enrich the JMU community over these decades. So, you know, speaking of all those years, tonight I hope we can think about those intergenerational connections, because to me that's part of what makes JMU so special. And it's part of what I know the Black Alumni Chapter really cares about as well, is connecting across the different generations of JMU. So as we hear the perspectives of our panelists tonight, I hope that will help us to think about both sort of the untold story, the history that we all need to know and understand of the university, where we've been, where we are today, and then where we can go from here with our current and future students and alumni. And to help us to do that, and I'm very excited to introduce our moderator. First of all, he has a great first name. Jonathan Page, who is a 1995 JMU alum, is going to be serving as our moderator. Jonathan, many of you may know, is the Director of Multicultural Affairs, as well as the Title VI Coordinator and the co-chair of the University Diversity Council at our friends at Longwood University. And on a personal note, I actually had the chance to speak to Jonathan and his colleagues not that long ago about issues of diversity and equity and inclusion in higher education. And I can tell you, he's a rock star on his campus. He is very well respected and is admired by his colleagues. And I kept hearing that all day. So Jonathan, thank you for taking the time, from your day job when you work on all these important issues to be with us tonight. We really, really appreciate it. And please give my regards to all of your colleagues at Longwood. Jonathan has been an educator for over 20 years in both secondary and higher education. He holds a bachelor's degree from where else, right? JMU, but also a master's degree from Longwood. And he's got extensive training and experience, of course, in these areas of diversity, equity, access, inclusion, and social justice, and is a real leader in the field. So, Jonathan, thank you for your commitment, for your service, and for being a part of this special program tonight. And can I turn it over to Jonathan?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I really do appreciate those kind words. It was great having you on campus, last January, President Alger. And your leadership is one thing that we talk about here at Longwood all the time. We admire you and want to get you back. So thank you so much for the kind words. And thank you so much for asking me to be the moderator tonight. I'm truly honored to serve in that capacity. And I'm really excited about really being the facilitator of this dynamic conversation with so many of our amazing alumni. And so tonight is really, really about them. So without further ado, we're going to begin tonight by introducing the panel. So what I'll do is I'll announce each one. And what I would love for you to do is, again, sort of state your name, your year, the degree that you received, and what you're currently doing. So let's go ahead and start out with Dr. Johnson.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Sherry Johnson. I graduated in 1970, and my major was library science. I was an educator for over 30 years, from elementary through university level at VCU. And right now, I'm technically retired, but I stay busy every day between my church and community work.
Outstanding. Welcome. Mr. Rankin.
Good evening. Happy to be here. Appreciate the opportunity. As she said, my name is Jim Rankin. I graduated in 1971, degree in social work. I had a long career, 38 years in juvenile justice in Northern Virginia. Was part of one of the fastest growing communities in America during that time. It was very exciting. A master's degree in criminal justice administration, public safety from VCU. I'm currently, and not technical, I'm fully retired. And I define that as doing what I want to do and nothing that I don't want to do.
Outstanding. Judge Wilson.
Good evening. Owen Wilson, class of 1987, majored in political science. Later went on to College of William & Mary, Marshall School of Law. I graduated in 91 with a Juris Doctorate, and I went to work for the government, mainly as an attorney, handling contract issues, litigation, so forth, for a number of years. About 14 years ago, I was appointed to the bench. So I've been a judge for the last 14 years, 13 and a half years roughly. That's about it. Thank you.
Excellent. Welcome. Ms. Harris. Looks like we may have a little bit of a tech issue. So we'll come back to Ms. Harris in a minute. Ms. Flowers.
Great evening, everyone. My name is Faithia Flowers Foster, and I graduated from Madison back in 1997. I had a double major in the business department, and I had a minor in African American studies. And right now I'm in the capital of Virginia, and I'm with the YMCA of Greater Richmond, serving as the association's director of Aging Well.
Excellent. Well, welcome. Now we'll jump back to you, Ms. Harris.
Okay, looks like I had a connection issue. Thank you for your patience. I am Annette Harris. I graduated in 1993, pledged Delta Sigma Theta Iota Alpha Chapter, spring 92. I majored in business, marketing, and a minor in fashion for University. And then years ago, took the leap of faith and stepped out with my company, which is called Show Up. I am in the business of training and consulting as well as coaching professionals. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for the honor of being on this panel.
Glad to have you. Dr. Parker.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Jonathan. Dr. Darian Parker. I graduated from JMU in 2001 with a bachelor's degree in kinesiology with emphasis in exercise leadership. Graduated again from JMU with my master's degree in kinesiology with an emphasis in athletic administration and advanced coaching. I went on to do my doctorate at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and sports education leadership, and currently I own two companies. One is Parker Personal Training, which is primarily a live virtual personal training company, and also I'm the co-owner of Epic Leisure Management, which is a spa, fitness, and recreation consulting and management company for luxury health and wellness amenities. Happy to be here. Thanks.
Outstanding. And Ms. Burrows.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tamika Fitzgerald Burrows, and I graduated with a Bachelor's of Science degree in 2004 from JMU and a minor in political science. I also have a master's from Old Dominion University, and I am currently pursuing a doctorate of educational leadership and higher education at Virginia Commonwealth University. During my time at James Madison, I was a cheerleader on the varsity co-ed team. And then after I graduated, I became the head cheerleading coach at JMU for 6 seasons. So glad to be here. I currently am in Northern Virginia. I'm a secondary special education department lead in Fairfax County Public Schools. And I'm also co-pastor of an Every Nation church plant in Alexandria, Virginia, called the Well Worship Center. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you with us. Ms. Carr.
Hi, my name is Arya Carr. I am in the class of 2007. I graduated with business degree in management and a concentration in technology innovation and entrepreneurship. I have a minor in photography. I am currently based in New York, in Brooklyn, New York, and I work for a technology and business consulting firm as an executive assistant. Glad to be here.
Excellent. It's good to have you. And Mr. Lane.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Zachary Lane. I graduated from JMU, the class of 2011. While at JMU, I double majored in justice studies and kinesiology. After JMU, I pursued a master's degree at the University of Memphis. After University of Memphis, I worked in the nonprofit space and the public sector for about 9 years. And I recently just graduated with another master's for career change from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And I am currently working in public accounting and pursuing my CPA.
Fantastic, welcome. Mr. Reed.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Boyd Alexander Reed. I graduated in 2015 with a Bachelor of Science in Communication Studies with a minor in French. I was part of the JMU men's soccer team under the late Coach Doc Martin. And I was also a Centennial Scholar. Want to do a special shout out to Miss Diane Strawbridge. Currently, right now, I am the co-founder of a company called Hop-In Technologies. What we do is we work with companies to help get their employees to and from work. I'm so excited to be part of this panel. Thank you.
Glad to have you with us. And Ms. Bourgeois.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I recently graduated this past spring, so spring 2020. I was a member of the track and field team at James Madison, and I studied psychology and computer information systems. And after graduating virtually, I relocated to Raleigh, North Carolina, where I am a solutions engineer at a tech company down here. And Tiffany was my advisor the past 3 years at JMU. So happy to be here with you guys.
Excellent. And Ms. Parson.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kayla Parson. I am also a May 2020 graduate of James Madison University. While at JMU, I was a Justice Studies major with a concentration in global justice and a minor in humanitarian affairs. And now I am working for a government contracting company as a management analyst with immigration processing. And I also am one of the events co-chairs and the social media manager person for Black Alumni Chapter.
Excellent, welcome. And I would be totally remiss if I did not introduce or allow her to introduce herself, Ms. Brutus.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tiffany Brutus. I graduated from JMU in 2004 with a Bachelor's of Science in Health Sciences, and then also in 2006 with a Master's in Health Sciences. And I'm currently pursuing my PhD in Strategic Leadership also at JMU. I currently serve as the Secretary for the JMU Black Alumni Chapter, and I also currently reside in Harrisonburg as I still work at the university as an Assistant Director of Student Athlete Services. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, everyone, for being here.
Absolutely. You know, it's quite a distinguished panel, and I'm really looking forward to hearing your stories, hearing your narratives, and really just having a good time this homecoming week. Going to put the panelists on a bit of a spot. You know, I love having sort of rapid fire questions. It's one of the things that I love, but typically my students don't because it puts them on the spot, but that's all right because, you know, we're Dukes, so we adapt very well. So the rapid fire question is, I want you to think of one word, and one word only, that you would use to describe JMU. Okay, so we're going to go down the list again with the roll call. So Sherry, what is the one word you would use to describe JMU?
Pleasant.
Pleasant, outstanding. James.
Changing.
Changing. Owen.
Family.
Family. Annette.
Community.
Community, strong. Faithia.
Friendly.
Excellent. Darian. Yep, you were on mute.
I will say open.
Open.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. To me.
I too will say family.
Nice. Aria.
Dynamic.
Nice. Zachary.
Supportive.
Very nice. Boyd.
Friendship.
Friendship, nice. Jordan.
Friendly.
Family. And Kayla.
Lessons.
Lessons, all right. All right, now that you've been warmed up, now we can jump in and really have some fun. And again, you know, panelists, if you want to answer the question, go ahead and use that raise hand function, and I will get to as many folks, you know, as I can. So I want to start out with, what was JMU like for you during your decade, and how were you connected with the African American community? Okay,
I'm Sherry Johnson, and so I guess I'll be the first to answer that one because by being one of two students who first enrolled at JMU in 1970, I found it to be a very accepting place by and large. Sometimes, of course, you had some people who were not as accepting, but on the whole, it was an accepting environment. And I enjoyed being there. I was a day student, and so my experience was probably different from the other student who entered the same year I did. And because she stayed in a dorm. So her experience was a little more stressful, but from my side, it was a good experience.
Excellent. And Darian, you had your hand up.
Yes, I would say my time there was in like mid to late 90s, and I think it was part of a big change for JMU. And one, it was very jarring for me because my freshman year, I lived in the Howard Johnson back when they had places there because they needed extra places for students to stay. So I lived in the Hojo my first year, and that was very weird, honestly. But it was made easier by I was on the men's track and field team my whole time there. And I felt very supported. Like I said, it's open before. I was vaulted into a life that was like an everyday life with all the young men that I was with and our coaches and all the athletes, and being surrounded by a lot of people who are striving towards the same goals. And so I felt like it was a incredibly inclusive community, meeting so many people. But also what was just special, I think, as a Black person was that, especially with track and field, all of my teammates in the sprinting group were Black. And so we had experience with each other every day, talking about different topics and things that were going on with us on a regular basis, being Black students, split student athletes throughout the course of our time there. And so we spent an inordinate amount of time with each other, crazy amount of time for that. And that was very memorable for me. But the university was changing dramatically. And they were building like crazy, starting to go on. And I could see that it was going to become a pretty large university because around the time I was there, it was around maybe 10, 11,000 students total for that. So it was a great time.
Nice. And Owen, what was your experience like?
Yeah, my experience in the 80s, the early 80s, from 83 to 87, you know, being a black student on the campus, you know, my class was one of the second or third large influx of Black students. So it felt very familiar, and this tiny microcosm of campus life. The majority of, I mean, quite a few of us lived in the village, so there was always something going on in the village, and it really had this, you know, at the time we only had 10 or 11,000 students total, which now you have twice that many, but everybody kind of knew some of the same people. So everyone was very friendly. We formed a lot of bonds that, you know, that crossed geographic boundaries, that crossed fraternal and sorority boundaries, all those kinds of things. We all just kind of came together, and it was just small. And some of the students from the 80s and 90s will use a term of, it was kind of an HBCU within JMU's community. And so a lot of us were very friendly, and we still get along to this day. When we come back, that's why a lot of us come back for homecoming, just to renew those friendships and to keep in touch, because we had such a great time while at Madison. So it was a very positive experience to me.
That's amazing. Aria, how about you?
There we go. I would kind of base my experience around my expectations when I came to JMU. I would say I grew up in a suburb outside of Boston that kind of mirrors the overall JMU diversity. So it's not very diverse in any scenario. And I also played soccer, which is also a not very diverse sport. And so I would say my expectations were fairly normal in how I was going into JMU. I know, like, as a Black person, we're not all monolith. We're not a monolith, and so came in trying to make friends the best way I knew how, and I would always kind of, again, like Darian, kind of steer towards the athletes, the track players, the football players, the basketball players, and we kind of created our own community and would branch out that way. Along with kind of breaking off with my sport a few years in, I got involved in CMIS and the University Program Board, which also really provided good support system at JMU.
Excellent. How about you, Jim? What was your time like back in the 70s?
You know, like Sherry, I was a day student, but I was still able to participate in intramural sports there, the social life that the campus offered at Madison College. But school met my expectations. We were in the middle of a movement across the country in terms of integration, high school, locally. And contrary to what a lot of schools and a lot of people have anticipated, it was a very smooth transition for me. It met my expectation. I knew what to expect. It was there. I knew I was expected to perform academically. I did. The school reciprocated by supporting me in the way that the teachers could. And so it was a very positive experience. I was locally grown. I grew up in Newmarket, was 18 miles north of the school, and it has always been a part of my life. I would go by there dozens of times. And so it's been my opportunity to watch that university, and I mentioned about change, grow from the one side of the street off Route 11, South Main, to major construction across 81. But it was a very pleasant experience. I'm pleased to have made that decision. Actually, it was a decision of necessity for me because of convenience, cost, etc. It worked out for me.
Excellent. So I know I'm supposed to be completely neutral, and unbiased, but, as a JMU alum, I can't do that because I know that the 90s were the best decade ever. So Annette, go ahead and share your story and hold it down and explain why that was the best. Looks like we may have a bit of a tech issue with that. So you all won't be able to hear how rocking the 90s were.
Oh, well, I could talk
Oh,
about
Faith, yeah, I'm
that.
sorry about that. Yes.
Yes, no, thank you. So yes, I attended Madison between 93 and 97. And my fondest memories were homecomings, the step shows, the convocation center. I do appreciate the comment talked about how it felt like a HBCU within a predominantly white institution. So I love that expression. I think that also was felt during my decade there. I can also appreciate the support that I received and many of my peers from Black staff and professors. I think that's very important to note. And one of the parts of your questions was connecting with the Black community there. And I did that in a couple of ways. As some fellow alums mentioned, I too joined a sorority, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. The Black Student Alliance was very relevant and active during that time. And lastly, I like to add that I was part of a core group of people who created an underground Black awareness newsletter that we would hand around campus, and I would equate it in today's term as the 1990s Black Twitter.
All right. Well, it sounds absolutely like JMU had such, tremendous impact on your development. And so when we think about navigating, the spaces of Harrisonburg, and looking at Madison itself as a predominantly white institution, what were some of the challenges that you faced as a minority student at a PWI? And how did you really navigate those challenges? Boyd.
Yeah, it was interesting. During my time was kind of the when Black Lives Matter movement really started sparking off. You know, June 2014, we saw the deaths of Eric Garner, Tamir Weiss, Michael Brown. So what was interesting during that time was how was the country going to react? I think it was a huge surge in terms of the next civil rights movement that we're currently still to this day experiencing. And I know, as being one of the few Black people, Black persons within my close friend group at James Madison University, I found myself having to be kind of that educator in the way of like kind of also directing them around misinformation as well, because a lot of misinformation around the Black Lives Matter movement, around what we were trying to accomplish in terms of our strive for equality. So for me, I wasn't super plugged into the different organizations that are around in terms of resources for Black students, but within the sports ecosystem that was already mentioned earlier in this panel, and also through the Centennial Scholarship Program as well, where we saw a lot of international students coming from all over the world, being able to share and connect with them because they had a special experience. Because I'm myself from Canada, so I have my own set of experiences up here as well. So that was kind of unique from my time point in that the 2010s of that Black Lives Matter movement, and how Black students kind of came to the forefront again of how to having to represent this movement for themselves within their internal friend groups, which were predominantly white.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So Kayla, as one of the most recent graduates, being part of the class of 20, what were some of the challenges that you faced?
Right. So I definitely agree that finding yourself in the role of an educator was very prevalent, but I think that something that was very frustrating about that was that it almost seemed like people weren't listening when you were trying to educate. I remember that I was a program advisor and a resident advisor for the Office of Residence Life, and one of the things I was tasked with both of those years was coming up with programming and facilitation guides that specifically had to do with multicultural education. And when we looked at the numbers of which programs were being attended, which ones were being checked out, my numbers were the lowest. And I had to talk with my boss about that and everything. And it wasn't the work that I was doing, it was just that there was lack of interest. And I really feel like it has to do with the foundation being set. And I think that oftentimes Black students at JMU are kind of pushed into these roles of building upon a foundation that has not been set. Realistically speaking, this should be the role of, faculty administration to make sure that students have an understanding of multicultural education when they come into JMU, a very thorough understanding that carries throughout their experience at JMU, and that is oftentimes viewed as being an optional opportunity. So when it does come time to educate, it is viewed as optional. And oftentimes it just seems like it's in one ear and out the other. And, it's very frustrating, but it's especially sad when we do have, situations that are coming up in our current climate and people really don't understand what's going on because no one's really taken the time to learn what's going on.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. I think that's an excellent point. And we're fortunate to have on the panel several, former student athletes. So I'd be really interested to hear that perspective as well. So Tamika, can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. So the challenges faced as a Black student coming from the 757 area, Virginia Beach, the area that I grew up in, Virginia Beach, was a huge melting pot. And so for me, the venture to Harrisonburg and JMU was somewhat of a culture shock. It was a little bit challenging to navigate being around white people that didn't have an experience growing up around as many Black people. And so that was something where I had a next door neighbor in my dorm who would ask questions of myself and my roommate, who we were friends that came to JMU together from growing up in Virginia Beach together. And she was on the track team as well. And so having to embrace somebody that really did have questions about like Black people presented in a way that they really did not understand, that was kind of like a shock for me. But what I'll say is, even though I was a part of the JMU cheerleading team, and I was the only Black cheerleader the entire time that I cheered, all 4 years, it was not as horrible or negative of an experience in terms of me feeling like I was different, or I didn't necessarily feel from my teammates that I was the only one like me. However, it was outside of my team that there were times where I kind of felt as though I was like the token cheerleader. So because of feeling that way, I made sure to really be a part of my Black community. So actually most of my friends were on the track team. So Tiffany and I are holding a 20-year friendship, and some other friends that I had on the track team. So I was easily mistaken sometimes as being a honorary member of the JMU track and field sprint team because I was with those ladies and gentlemen. But I think that one thing I'll say in terms of the exposure that being at a predominantly white institution provided, whether there were some experiences in terms of what we could define as negative because it is a predominantly white institution, I don't look at it as negative in the sense that it wasn't purposeful in shaping who I am and who I became in terms of my identity as an African American, and just really coming to gain and build confidence as not just an African American, but an educated African American female. And my major was public administration. So I was in a major that was dominant white male. But I felt that the support from the institution and faculty and staff, Black and white, were very meaningful in shaping the collegiate experience for me at JMU. And so I literally bleed purple and am proud to be an alumni.
Absolutely. So, you know, it wasn't a hindrance or a barrier, but it was really truly that moment of opportunity. You know, that's excellent. Annette, what about you?
Sure, thank you for asking. First, I want to go back to the last question, and because I wanted to say so bad that my time at JMU was truly the best time of my life, and period. So I wanted to start there. And then it's interesting hearing the perspectives from the alumni who were there in the 2000s, because if anything, I didn't feel color as much. It took me a while to sort of figure out my identity, but JMU looked very similar to my high school. So for me, I didn't feel like race was an issue. Now I'm going to have to go talk to all my friends that I'm still in touch with, but it wasn't about a color thing. I started, and I had the honor to be a part of the transition program, which was a program that started in the summer, and certain students were invited to be a part of that program and start school the summer before my freshman year. So, it was for all African-American students. So there I was, in my mind, immersed, right? So we were in a dorm all together. And then when I got into, freshman year and sophomore year, come Friday night, Saturday and Sunday, we were up in PC Dukes, so it was brown people everywhere. So that's the early 90s. I did not feel a sense of color as much, unless I left campus and went to the Valley Mall. Then I felt it, but in general, it just felt like I didn't have to worry about it. And I felt like I was around like-minded people who were, like, I heard the word friendly as the one word. I mentioned community. So if anything, it was a time for me to really grow and into who I was based on the people that were around me. So yeah, no one asked me about my color. I didn't have to explain who I was. So that's interesting to see the dynamics between the early 90s, and maybe others had that, but for me, it didn't impact my experience.
Mm-hmm. And what about you, Jordan?
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked the question, Jonathan, as far as being a student athlete, because I think being a minority student and a student athlete brings kind of two sets of challenges. There's a lot you have to balance as a student athlete, and I do think there are some stereotypes that come along with student athletes when it comes to the academic setting. So growing up where I did in the suburbs, JMU was very similar to that. So I wasn't necessarily shocked by the lack of diversity when I got to JMU, and being on the track team, our team was, I'd say, one of the most diverse teams that we had at JMU. So I felt very welcomed being on the team, but I feel like my entire time at JMU, I had to kind of prove the stereotypes wrong in the sense of being an African-American student and then also a student athlete. And I've even had professors kind of at the end of the semester, I always go up to my professors and tell them thank you. Even if I didn't love them, I still go up and I'm like, thank you for this class. Like, I had a great time. And I've had professors tell me that, you know, you were a pleasant surprise. Like, I was very shocked to see you like sat up front and things like that, which I don't know, that could be a compliment, but sometimes I would take it as, you know, they were a little bit shocked about how much I participated or how I performed in the class. So I don't know if that was due to being a student athlete or if that was due to being an African-American student, I'm not sure, but those were kind of two different sets of challenges that I faced being at JMU. But at the same time, I do believe that it did shape who I am, from growing up where I did, being a minority there, and then at JMU as well. I mean, that's how the world is. So I feel like it's prepared me pretty well for what I do now working in corporate America. So I'm very appreciative of the experience that I had at JMU, the encounters that I've had, and even before JMU as well. So I definitely agree with Tamika in that sense that it definitely did help to shape who I am as a person.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, I think back to a comment that Owen made earlier when he talked about the reason we love coming back to homecoming. You know, one of the things that I remember fondly is, you know, the homecoming festivities and when alumni would come back, and we really got a chance to see sort of the legacy. And we were constantly reminded that, you know, we were standing on the shoulders, you know, of those trailblazing, you know, African-American students, and that we wouldn't be there, you know, had it not been for them. So, you know, I want to think about that and have you, if you can, Jim, share, you know, that what was that experience like for you? You know, I know you were a day student, you know, it was the 70s, there were very few African-American students on campus. So you even faced a different set of circumstances than the rest of us did. So what were some of those challenges that you faced?
Great question. I know that I did not have the challenges that many people might would have anticipated. For one, I would have had a PhD in operating in a predominantly white institution. I mean, I grew up, you know, everything was predominantly white. I was the only black student on my Little League baseball team. I was the only black in Boy Scouts. I was the only black a lot of times. So I often knew how to navigate, negotiate, being in that environment. I also think that in retrospect, that I probably would have had difficulty attending a HBCU just because of my lack of association with African Americans. But I did use my being at home weekends, and I was able to recognize who I was. The experience for me was just so normal. As I said, we integrated to high school. It, to me, it was just the next step. It was a part of a movement across the country, and it went surprisingly smooth. Mm-hmm. I think probably students after me expected more and may have more disappointed because they didn't get that. But my expectations were if JMU or Madison College wasn't going to invent more black students, it was those who were there. And I happened to be there. Sherry was there. We were comfortable. I had other friends. I met my wife there. Mm-hmm. So it was a very pleasant experience, but it didn't have the challenges that such that I could not feel successful academically or socially.
Excellent. You know, and when we think about sort of that, the Madison experience, and I think about, you know, the years that each one of us graduated, and we look at those as sort of seminal transition periods. You know, Owen, when I think about, you know, you coming out in '87, sort of that transition time from some of the growth that we were seeing in the '80s to the transitioning into the 90s, which is when I came in. But so what were some of the things that you faced on campus?
Well, coming from, I grew up in Richmond, on the north side of Richmond, so it was not very diverse. My high school was fairly large, and it was predominantly Black. I'd say over 90% Black. And so when I went to JMU, I was in the band, so we showed up 2 weeks early, and I was on the drum line, which was even more sequestered. I was the only person of color on the drum line at that time. Later, there was another woman who played in what's called the pit. So I was immediately thrusted into this strange environment that I had just never experienced. And I really didn't understand, and this may sound weird, but it was almost like going to a foreign country. I couldn't really understand the language. I was afraid to talk because I knew that, I didn't want to sound stupid, because I had been comfortable navigating my way through Black America, living in, in a segregated city, that was segregated on purpose in the city of Richmond, to now going to the Shenandoah Valley and this experience at James Madison in the band where, again, I was the only person of color. And so I just happened to be one time I was eating in D Hall during band camp, and I was eating by myself because no one, everyone else is eating at their own tables, they're laughing, having a good time. And I was sitting at a table by myself. And then somebody came and sat down next to me. And I looked up, and it was Ron Carrier, who basically, how many university presidents, number one, are going to, pick the lone Black guy to come sit and eat with? But we ate and we talked, and and so it kind of put me at ease. I'm like, if this is the president of the university, and he's having lunch with this random Black kid from Richmond, this is a different kind of place. Right. And so what it did was it showed me that, it made me able to be a little more comfortable around others. I live in Northern Virginia now, which is extremely diverse, but as well as going out into the corporate world, working for the government, where I'd go into a place in a military environment where I was the only person of color, and let alone a lawyer. But I learned how to deal with that from my experience at JMU. So, and also, as one of the other panelists mentioned, the summer transition program, I unfortunately was not part of that, but the summer transition program created this already built-in group of friends that, they were all connected and tight. And one of my roommates was also in that program. So next thing you know, I get pulled into that, and I have it's instant family. So that's when you asked about, what did JMU, the one word for me was family, because I was taken in, and it's been a great experience ever since. Even when I went off to law school, that was a different experience, and the students are different there. But JMU is definitely a unique place. So in the 80s, we also went from small Black population to a burgeoning population. And then you have Greek letter organizations that are on the expand. And so, I was fortunate enough to be a charter member of the Omega Psi Phi Beta Delta Delta chapter. And so all these things, happened at JMU. So I was very grateful for that.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, you really speak to that formative and transformative, experience. And so, Darian, I hope that you can kind of round this out for us, because you have, the background of being a student athlete, but you also were a graduate student. So you saw Madison through multiple lenses. So can you speak to that experience and how you navigated not only as a student athlete and an undergraduate student, but also as a graduate student?
Yeah, I think that my entire undergraduate time was a lot of track and field. I mean, I was there my entire time as a track and field athlete. And I think one of the most interesting, and I've been thinking about this, one of the most interesting aspects of my time as a track and field athlete, again, is most of my teammates were Black on the sprint team. And I remember our coach was Bill Walton. The men's team doesn't exist anymore, JMU. But during that time, he was a coach. And I remember I was one of the captains of the team. And I remember him saying, Darian, I want to have a conversation with you. And I said, yeah, sure. He said, you know, a lot of the guys on the team use the N-word all the time. And I noticed you don't use it and all that. And so we actually ended up having a very large conversation before practice about why people were using that. And the coach wanted to understand the whole thing about it. And then, we became this huge dialogue between our white coach and all these Black athletes about the use of that word and how we grew up. And, for me, it was very different. I grew up in a military family. My entire childhood, teenage years, and half of JMU, my parents were still in the military. So I grew up around literally people all over the world. I was born in another country, lived half of my life before teenager being in other countries. And so coming to JMU was like, it was just kind of, I was like, well, it's just another situation for me. It's another assignment in the sense with that. But that was like the first time I had those type of conversations amongst other people about those type of things, like the use of that word and connotations and the history. And which was interesting with our white coach, who he wanted to have that conversation. He was pushing for it. Mm-hmm. And it created all this dialogue between all of us about where we're from, the whole thing. And I think as my time as a graduate student was very wonderful. It was amazing. I had lots of great mentors. The late Dr. Chalice McMillan was my mentor. Amazing, amazing human being. Mm-hmm. Took me under his wing immediately. I was much like Jordan. I sat in the beginning, the front of the class, every single class at JMU. I loved every one of my professors. They were incredibly amazing human beings. That's the best thing about JMU. One time I wrote in the Professors You Love deal. That was the best part. The professors, they literally, we loved each other. It was a real love fest in there. And I think as a graduate student, that just continued they just saw me as someone who was competitive in the classroom, wanted to get better, wanted to grow. And it was an incredible experience. I think Madison taught me how to be a man, honestly, during that time. And then, as my time there, I was there 7 years, I was able to move on. And now I think a lot of people here on the East Coast, I am in Washington State, the furthest way you can get from JMU. I think I'm on the border of Canada, like a mile from the border of Canada. But I love JMU. It was an incredible opportunity for me. I appreciate it.
Well, that's tremendous. It's a great story. And it's also a fantastic segue into, the next question. We talk a lot about sort of the co-curricular experience and what was it like, navigating, clubs and orgs, residence halls and things like that. But, let's take a minute and also think about the preparation that the academic side of the house, academic affairs really did for us. And so how did JMU prepare you for success and really prepare you to compete both in the job market and in life as a whole? Kayla, let's go ahead and start with you.
Okay, so I have a bit of an interesting story about how I got to where I am right now academically. It's not that interesting, but it's my story, so I find it interesting. So I actually did not come into JMU as an Justice Studies major. I came in as an International Affairs major because I thought that it was going to be challenging for me, and I thought that was going to be a good thing. And yes, it was challenging, but something I had to realize was that along with that challenge, I had a lack of interest in what I was studying. And I realized that was a really big problem. So when I got into the Justice Studies major, I felt like that was the first time at JMU where I was being challenged, but I was still passionate about what it was that, was challenging me. And I wanted to, be able to dive deeper into what I was learning. And I think that switching over to Justice Studies did prepare me for where I am now for multiple reasons. I think the first is playing on that first point of, being challenged in life, but being passionate about your challenge, because realistically, life is not going to be easy. Your career field is not going to be easy, but if you have that passion that's going to keep you going, that's a necessity. I think for me, I had to realize very early on that I can't stay in a place where I'm being challenged and I don't care. So for me to be able to be somewhere where I'm being challenged to grow and I'm being challenged to do better and be better, and it's something that I do care about, I think that's a wonderful thing. And I'm very excited to see what the rest of my life is going to look like. But I think another aspect of academics was that JMU has a lot of very unique opportunities academically for students to engage in. And one that I took upon myself to look into was the Washington semester. So my last semester at JMU, I actually did go back to political science for a moment for their Washington semester program. And this was a semester-long domestic abroad semester in Washington, DC. And long story short, I was interning and I was taking classes. And I think that this was a very small but a very necessary piece of the real world that I did not realize that I needed. And I think that it was one of the best ideas I could have made to make this decision, even though it was cut short due to COVID. But I cannot guarantee that I would have had that same opportunity somewhere else other than JMU. So I think that taking that chance on those unique opportunities, whether they pan out to be for the better or for the worse, is still a very important part of success as well. Like, you need to be able to be willing to take those risks and, put yourself out there and take yourself out of your comfort zone.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Zachary, what about you?
Yeah, so just in regards to being able to compete both, academically and professionally, I think JMU, it really afforded me the opportunity. I was able to get connected with a lot of mentors at the university. A few names that come to mind, people like Arthur Dean, Diane Strawbridge. I was also in the Centennial Scholars Program. Dr. Joanne Gabbin, Zeb Davenport. So being able to connect with, those prominent people of color, they helped me put in perspective of being very well balanced. So not only focusing on the academic side, but also getting involved with the extracurriculars to be a good, well balanced student. So in my time at JMU, outside of the classroom, I got involved with things like alternative spring break. And that really helped me find my niche of giving back and volunteering, because I've always liked helping others. But when I found out that JMU had opportunities for me to forego my spring break and volunteer to help others, that was something that, sparked my interest. So that was something I committed to doing all of my years at JMU. I never went home for a spring break. I always volunteered. So that was something that it helped me find my passion outside of the classroom. And then also with those mentors, they always talk to me about being able to prioritize my time management. So when it came down to trying to plot out my academic calendar, it always allowed me to focus on scheduling time to do my academics, but also being well balanced outside of the classroom. And from a professional standpoint, that helped me because, as we get into our careers, we have to be able to prioritize, manage a lot of different projects. So having that balance at JMU really helped career-wise, being able to manage things in a working space.
It's interesting that you say that, because it really, as you were speaking, it made me realize the connections that we have, as Madison alumni. Because some of the names that you mentioned, Diane Strawbridge, when I was there in the early 90s, she was a mentor for me along with Byron Bullock. You mentioned Zeb Davenport, he was my line brother. You mentioned Art Dean, he and our paths crossed because we were at Madison at the same time. So you see that there's this way that we just give back, and that we stay connected, because there's just something about the institution that I think that continues to pull us back, and it continues to make us want to be a part of it, because we're just part of that ongoing legacy. So, I thought, thank you for that, Zachary. It's very well said. Faithia, how about you?
Yes, thank you. Yes, definitely. Madison prepared me and everyone here for their life's journey. I know for me, with the double major in business, marketing, and management, I went on to join, then it was called Anderson Consulting, was changed at Accenture right after undergrad. And I know in part that wasn't possible unless I really focus on my academics. So I so appreciate the Multicultural Center and others from my hometown in Hopewell that my freshman year, when I earned a 3.0 in my first semester, they motivated me to say, okay, so what's next? What are you going to earn next semester? So literally every semester after that, my GPA got better and better each time. So I know that success wouldn't have been possible without that support, and positioned me to start the career at Anderson and went on to earn 2 more graduate degrees. Also, I took a tally of my sorority line sisters. There's 10 of us total. And of that cohort of Black women, there's 3 sisters who earned their doctorate degree. All of us have earned a master's or 2, and 5 of them are leaders in education. So I also think that speaks to the JMU value. And lastly, as I shifted from corporate America to nonprofit, where I am now with the YMCA, that too would not have been possible without JMU. And with a little bit of humor, I gained that freshman 15 with that big cereal dispenser in D Hall. Me and my sweet mate, Sophia Jordan, we got our certifications to be able to teach group exercise, and both of us have careers in fitness now, in part due to JMU, so.
That's outstanding. And how about you, Annette?
So I'm going to be a little vulnerable here and say it prepared me to be resilient. And as a business major, it was really, really tough for me. My grades weren't as high as they needed to be. I had to fight to get into the business school because I didn't have the GPA. So from my standpoint, I think very early on, the education at JMU taught me to keep going, to have drive. I'll never forget my roommate, Princess. I was having trouble with classes, and she said, well, you can't do things the same way if you want things different. And I remember trying to study differently, but there were resources on campus, the reading and writing lab. I took advantage of those. But yeah, it definitely prepared me because they weren't giving out any grades at JMU, right? Any A's and B's. And so I had to work really hard. For me, I took fewer courses. And so that was okay. I learned early on in my life not to compare. So I just took fewer courses. I was there every summer. I loved the opportunity to have May session and then to take classes over the summer. And so, yeah, it taught me to be resilient because it wasn't easy for me personally to get through the business school. I had a little too much fun those first couple of years, and so I had to play catch up. It also prepared me as I went into business school, my MBA. I felt like I had a one-up. I understood about group projects and the dynamics there, and I had a baseline of business knowledge. So for me, I would say that not only did it prepare me, but it made me resilient. It made me not give up on what I wanted as far as my career was concerned. And a lot of it was I was on my own. I don't know that I didn't really have mentors while I was there, but I had really good friends, and then my sorority sisters. So just seeing what they were doing and how well they were doing, that community and that support helped me. And then after graduating, I found that when I would go to different companies and organizations, one of them was at Deloitte, and a mentor of mine once said, it's always good students that come out of JMU. So that made me feel really good. And it wasn't the first time I had heard that.
Excellent. And Jordan, why don't you round us out with that one?
Yeah, so for me, I actually do have something to compare James Madison to in terms of academics. I transferred from the University of Pittsburgh to James Madison, and I can say that I had a lot more opportunities in terms of academics and internships at JMU in comparison to Pittsburgh. So I think being a student athlete, sometimes you're kind of forced to choose between, you know, academics and your career and your athletics, but at JMU, they really make it work. So if you're proactive and you work hard, they're gonna allow you to go after those things that you want. So for me, I did an internship, each summer. One was in Japan, one was in California. I did internships during the fall semester and the spring semester while doing track. And that was because the athletic department was willing to work with me and allow me to go after those things that I wanted to accomplish. And then, you know, we have people like Tiffany, who was my advisor, and I can say out of all the advisors, she's by far the best. I might be a little biased, but she would personalize opportunities for us that we could go after. So she would put together a folder of different academic opportunities that were going on in the summertime, for post-college opportunities as well. And so it was really that support system all around that I had at JMU that I didn't necessarily have at the University of Pittsburgh. So, and I've heard the same thing, Annette, from Deloitte. When I got my offer from them, they were like, our JMU students perform the best at Deloitte at our office here in Arlington. So that is a huge thing. And that prepared me very well. I came to the point where I didn't know which job to choose because I had so many options. And I really do think that's due to JMU and the way that they prepared me during my time there.
Absolutely. And I would say that that's a strength that we all have, and it's an advantage, because I can't tell you, as I've traveled around the country for conferences and such, that when people hear that I'm a JMU, alumni, their ears kind of perk up. They've heard of it, and the name means something.
Oh, yeah.
Exciting. And so that's something that, as former Dukes and future Dukes, we have that's a true advantage. So that's a special thing that we have. I know I want to ask sort of one final question, because we have some amazing questions from some of our attendees that I want to get to. But so I kind of want to wrap up this way. I want you to think about, based on now, what advice would you give to your college age self? Okay, so think about that for a minute. We want to try to be brief, and I want to hear from as many of us as possible. But based on what you know now, what advice would you give to your college age self? Boyd.
The advice I would give to my college age self is really, really take a moment to look at all the resources that are available to you. It is incredible. Fortunate for me, I was, again, a student athlete, so I had resources kind of handed to me immediately upon entering the school. Tiffany was one of those advantages as well. But Diane Strawbridge, like I mentioned earlier as well, was someone, so I was almost spoon-fed a lot of resources. But even that, I was given, there were so many more resources that I really could have taken advantage of that I didn't really realize until my junior and senior year. So my advice to my younger self would just take a moment, ask questions, and really capitalize on the resources, because James Madison does an amazing job of providing resources for their students. Whether you're a student athlete, whether you're coming from anywhere, there's resources that can help you be successful.
Outstanding. Aria, what advice would you give?
I would say you don't have to figure everything out right now. I feel like college has this stigma or thing that you have to figure out who you are and where you're going and what you're doing. And that's the path you're going to be on for the rest of your life. And just based on all the experiences I've had, I can say you can constantly change and adapt. And JMU has definitely set you up to persevere and become whoever you want to be at whatever stage in life you're at.
Excellent. Faithia.
Yes, I like to second Boyd. There are a lot of things that JMU have right now that are free or low cost. I need you to take advantage of all of them right now. I wish I would have done more of the outdoor exploration of the great Shenandoah Valley while I was there.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Darian, what advice would you give?
This is probably going to sound not the best, but I wish I would have partied a lot more when I was there. I didn't party. I mean, I made up for it quite a bit after I left JMU, but I wish I would have had more fun because I was so engrossed in track and field and academics, and those are good things, obviously, but I would have partied a lot more. Most definitely.
Excellent. What about you, Zach?
Yeah, two things. One, I probably would have had a different major. I would have probably been in a business school at JMU in hindsight. And then kind of to piggyback off Darian, I would have probably socialized more. I was kind of also very engrossed in my academics. Being a Centennial Scholar, I wanted to always, get the 3.0. So I was very, gung-ho academically, and I would forego a lot of social opportunities to study, like on Friday nights, Saturday nights. So I would have, in hindsight, done a little more socializing, and like I said, majored in something in the business school.
Okay, excellent. All right, Kayla.
I have two things, and I'll try and make them quick. I wish I could see his face. He's in the next room. The first is listen to my parents and my family. And I say that because, well, first of all, my brother and sister went to JMU as well. So I had some big siblings who kind of gave me the rundown of what to do and what not to do, but also to just looking at life. My parents definitely had a lot of advice to give me during that time. And I know for a fact that there were some times that I had to do things my own way before I chose to listen.
Mm-hmm.
And I could have saved myself a lot of time and tears had I just listened to them to begin with. And I think the second thing that I would tell myself is to find God again. And I say that because I grew up in the church. I grew up knowing God. And I thought that when I got to college, that foundation would be enough to get me through without it being maintained.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until I reached a pretty low point during my junior year that I realized, I need to rethink the relationship that I have with God and what that's looking like, and what I need to do to make sure that that is going to be sustained throughout not just the rest of my time at college, but throughout the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, those were some amazing responses, some great stories, some fantastic advice. And so now I want to kind of turn the tables and turn this over to what our attendees have asked. So I'm going to go through some of the stuff that's in the Q&A. And this is open to anyone. You don't have to raise your hand for this. Just kind of jump in. We'll try to get to as many of these questions as possible. The first one that we have is, as a Black Duke, what would you change, large or small, about your Madison experience?
I'll go. I would have loved to have had some more minorities on the cheerleading team with me.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, when I became the cheerleading coach at JMU, I was determined to provide opportunities for more minorities to be a part of the team, and they were. And I think that ever since 2005 and beyond, our team at JMU has seen a nice spectrum of individuals on the team. So I think that's something that I would have changed.
Excellent.
Can I go real quick?
Yeah, absolutely, Kayla.
I think this is not just a JMU thing, but I think that my experience at JMU kind of made me realize the bigger issue. For me, I would change the way that Black women are viewed on JMU's campus. And I say that because with my experiences and with viewing my friends' experiences and other Black women's experiences, I realized that we're only valued conditionally. We're only valued if we look a certain way, or if we act a certain way, or we're only valued for certain things. And that mindset has caused consequences for a lot of Black women at JMU. And, it really hurts me to think that, our Black girl magic is not appreciated. Like, that really does hurt my soul. And just thinking back to some of the things that, I had to acknowledge and process, and things that my friends had to go through, it wasn't fair and it wasn't necessary. And I think it's one of those things where it's like, oh, well, you have to go through the dirt to become the flower. And it's like, we're already flowers. We shouldn't have to go through the dirt.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, the next question that we had really speaks to one of the comments, previously about sort of describing the JMU experience as almost like having a smaller HBCU within the larger, PWI. And so what this person would like to know is, particularly from our most recent graduates, if you shared that same experience of feeling like there was an HBCU within the larger institution.
So I think based on just hearing the descriptions of some of your experiences back in the 90s, that JMU wasn't like its own HBCU. Kayla, you might be able to agree with me or disagree, but I think being on the track and field team, I was kind of in that like athlete circle. So I wouldn't say that I had a lot of time to like go out into the Black community and, see it for myself, but just from like an outsider looking in and from some of my friends and living with my roommates who were part of that community, it didn't really seem that way. So yeah, I don't think so. I think it's a little bit different now.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think, Kayla?
Jordan, I definitely agree with you. And I definitely wanted to hear your perspective because I know, we saw each other in passing sometimes. No, like JMU is not an HBCU. The Black community is not an HBCU. And I don't, mean that in a negative way. I just mean we have certain aspects of Black culture that we may have tried to implement into JMU, but that was it. Like, we can't make JMU something that it wasn't. And I don't think any of us were trying to. I think the only time I personally felt that like HBCU experience at JMU was the homecoming step show. And that's because, you had alum coming, you had everybody in their letters and, everybody stepped out. Like, I remember my first homecoming step show, I was in Sperry's, and the last one I was in heels. So, it was this big difference, but realistically speaking, that's just not the vibe that JMU is. And that's not a bad thing. It's just JMU and HBCUs are different things, and we have to acknowledge that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Can I add something to that? And
of course. Go ahead, Owen.
I think some of that comes from the fact that the school was half as large as it is now.
True.
You have a smaller school, and everybody's not spread out we were all on one side. There was no East Campus. So you had that plus the summer transition program, and you had this kind of built-in, group that just doesn't exist anymore. And I think that's the reality of the situation. And for some of us older alums, we kind of look at that and say, and on one hand, we kind of feel sorry for you because you're missing out on this experience. What you have is a different experience, not to say that it's good, bad, or indifferent, but we know what it was like when we were there. And 30 years later, almost 40 years later for some, we still have these close relationships that came out of that.
Mm-hmm.
So that is more of, so when I use the term HBCU, I'm not saying that JMU, is trying to be an HBCU. I'm saying it is, at the time it was HBCU-like.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I would say when we think of organizations that, a couple of people had mentioned BSA, we had SMO, Students for Minority Outreach, you had Bond, you had Women of Color, but there was also a very vibrant and dynamic Black Greek life, that was there. And I remember in the 90s, when I first came on campus in 1990 and I went to my first step show and I actually saw, 8 of the Divine Nine, that were there. And it just blew my mind. And just, being able to, I pledged, in the spring of 91, and I kind of came into that environment and it was just eye-opening. So I immediately had, that community and that connection. And so kind of with that in mind, let's speak to that a little bit. How is Black Greek life at JMU?
I can start. I, joined Alpha Phi Alpha Xi Delta chapter fall 2008. And at that time, 8 of the 9 organizations were on campus when I got there. And in regards to just the collaboration, I would say from my vantage point, you know, all of the organizations were collaborative. There was also Intercultural Greek Council, where we would meet regularly, which was all of the Divine Nine organizations. So I would say it was a very collaborative environment. A lot of the organizations, you know, as they did their programming, they partnered with some of the other organizations. So it was very collaborative, very supportive. I know myself personally, I would always try to make an effort to attend all of the organizations from all of the different organizations just to be supportive, just to, you know, kind of show that NPHC love to the other organizations. I would also say there was a healthy competition as well. You know, as we would do our programming, you know, we would try to be the best as we did our programming, step shows and things of that nature. So I would say it was a healthy environment, collaborative environment. All of the organizations were very active with their programming and their recruitment, initiations and things like that. So from my vantage point, it was a very active life in regards to the Greek letter organizations.
Excellent. Would anybody else like to speak to that?
I would just second everything you stated. I too was there during the 90s, and I agree with everything Zachary said.
Excellent. Well, I have to give some love to, you know, one of the panelists who asked a question. So this one goes out to Brother Robertson. He asks, do you see yourselves as active ambassadors to recruit other Black students to come to JMU? And if not, why? And he also wants to add that it was a serious HBCU inside of JMU in the 80s and 90s. And I have to concur. But do you see yourselves as true ambassadors for the institution and try to recruit other students to come? And if not, why?
I'd like to start.
Sure, Kayla, go ahead.
I don't necessarily know if I would use the term ambassador, just because that kind of, I don't know, it kind of plays on this connotation of tokenism, like, oh, we're just trying to get more Black students here. And I think, yes, we do want more Black students present, but we want them here for genuine reasons, not just to raise numbers. So I think that in a way, yes, as a Black student, it is, or a Black alumni now, it is my responsibility to share my experiences with other Black students who are considering JMU, you know, if that's what they choose, so that they understand what it is that they may be committing to. However, with that being said, I'm not going to sugarcoat my experience just to get you to go to JMU. I want you to be able to make a sound decision on whether you feel that JMU is the right place for you. And if my experiences are going to clarify some of that or clear some of that up for you, then, you know, that's great. And yes, I will do my part, but I never want to feel like I'm forcing somebody to attend my alma mater just to say, oh, you know, we have another Black student here. Now, I will be honest, my little cousin, like, she's considering JMU. I'm trying to get her to go, but that's because she likes JMU. If she didn't like JMU, or I knew like her heart was at VCU or something, I would do what I need to do to make sure that she is making a sound decision. So I think that, you know, as Black alum, we need to do our part in contributing, but not forcing.
Yeah, I agree with that, Kayla. For me, I definitely promote JMU if I feel like, you know, that might be what that person's looking for. If you want that HBCU like feel, then that's not JMU. So I think that some African American students will come to JMU with different expectations, and, you know, they can end up a bit disappointed. But I think if you go to JMU without those expectations, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't have the expectations to, you know, feel a sense of belonging or anything like that, but to have the expectations to have an HBCU like college experience, then you shouldn't necessarily consider a PWI in general. So I definitely promote JMU if I think that that's, you know, a good fit for that person, in comparison to say like UVA or Virginia Tech. Then of course I'm gonna always promote JMU.
I think I would share, just looking beyond JMU, but the community, the Harrisonburg community and the entire Shenandoah Valley, in talking about JMU to other people. I also share what that environment is like outside of JMU and how there may be some things that could shift people's desire to be a part of the JMU community because of the community that JMU is within. And so I try to give individuals a heads up about this is a slower pace. You know, this is the Shenandoah Valley. It's very different than any of the metropolitan areas throughout Virginia. And I will say that a lot of the things that I learned about that community and some of the misconceptions that I had about some of the people that grew up in that community transformed when I too, for a brief period of time, was a townie, a Harrisonburg townie. So my two children were actually born there, and I met my husband, a Bridgewater graduate from that area. So I think that the JMU environment is conducive to the community that it's within, and that the experience in itself is going to be based on what that individual is looking for. If you need something that's faster paced and you can access lots of things off campus and go into an environment where Walmart isn't the hot spot, then you should probably not come to JMU. But I will always encourage people to go to a school where they feel like it's a fit for them. And I think in terms of size, JMU is a great size. If you want to have that big campus feel, but also that intimate campus feel, I feel like JMU offers a great balance. Activities and engagement, being able to participate in club sports and club activities that give you that sense of community is available. You don't have to be a student athlete for one of the varsity teams to get athletic experience. There are several clubs and organizations to be a part of. There's several things to do. Arts is amazing at JMU. Like, you know, again, but I bleed purple. So of course I'm going to advocate it, but I think that anybody should go to a campus where they feel that they would be the best fit, and then also consider the community that campus is in.
Excellent, well said. And I'm looking at the clock, and I know we're coming up on the edge of time, but there was one more question that I wanted to ask, and again, try to get as many responses as we can, particularly when we think about networking and we think about being alumni, more specifically being Black alumni. What experiences have you had after graduation where you were either mentored or given advice or assistance from other JMU alumni?
I'll speak to that very quickly. So again, I'm from Toronto. So as an international student, it's very different coming to Virginia. I didn't really know anybody, obviously, and had preconceived notions from Toronto to come to Virginia. And you would assume, with me being so far away, that there wouldn't be any benefits when it comes from like a networking standpoint from me going to James Madison University. Honestly, not a lot of people, well, if anybody, maybe 1% of the Canadians know about James Madison University, if that. But what was amazing was some of the professors and some of the my mentors, what they're willing to do for me while I was in the process of graduating and postgraduates in terms of getting me in front of people for business opportunities. They're willing to open up their network and their people that they didn't know, but they knew somebody that knew somebody that knew somebody that knew somebody and was willing to open up. So I have to do like quick shout outs to like Dr. Tony Whitfield, Dr. Lori Britt, that were part of the communication studies students that really opened up their network to the third to fourth to fifth degree to help me in terms of looking at potential opportunities. And by no means did they have to do that, but I think that speaks to the volumes of the amazing professors that are at James Madison University and what they're willing to do for their students.
I'll have to second that. I mean, as I said before, had amazing professors, and I'll mention Dr. McMillan again. You know, I was connected to him all the way up through towards the end for him. I mean, it was a 20+ year relationship that we had, and a lot of my professors still keep up with me. from the kinesiology department. And so there's always been, Madison has always pulled me back on some level with networking and connections. And as I grew and increased my network of people outside of Madison, I've always had this sense of I could always come back to the people at Madison. I could always talk to people. Nick Langridge is one of my roommates at James Madison. We're still very tight today. And he's like Tiffany, he's been there, he never left. He stayed there the entire time. And always had people that I could always count on. And if I needed something, I wanted to talk to anybody back at JMU about it, they'll always get back to me super quick. Very receptive, and it was just the whole thing of just great professors who really cared about teaching. That was my favorite part, is the professors wanted to teach. And that's not, and I went to different universities, that's not always the case. There's always usually a huge research emphasis and graduate students teaching classes all the time. But I always felt that in Madison, the teachers, at least in my experience, wanted to teach, wanted to help, and cared about you actually as a human. And I really appreciated that.
All right, I just want to add one more thing as well. I just want to open up because the amazing stuff that, not only I mentioned the professors, but, some of my friends as well that I made at James Madison University to help and support their debut to me. So I wanted to open up not only for my alumni, but also to students and future students at James Madison University to definitely reach out to me any way I can help in terms of plugging you to in, because I'm much more connected up north of the border, but any international opportunities, definitely reach out. I'm definitely willing to pass the favors that were given to me down to my fellow Dukes.
I'd like to add that I have been asked on many occasions to write letters of references for people interested in attending JMU. I have freely done that. But more importantly, in my career, I've been in a hiring capacity, been a director or chief administrator for well over 30 years, and have the opportunity to hire many former alumni Dukes. And I just feel very special about them. I think they felt special or comfort about being interviewed and then being hired and eventually working with and for me. So it has been a good experience, and I still, even as a retiree, I've got grandchildren that I would like to see consider JMU. But I agree, it's got to be a good fit, what they're looking for. If they're looking for a nice blend of schools, size-wise and multicultural, good. But if you're looking for HBCU, then think about Virginia State, Norfolk State.
I was just going to add that, I just had opportunity, since graduating, just getting involved with, the Black Alumni Chapter. I helped serve in that capacity on the executive board for a number of years. And then also back in my hometown in Richmond, I was involved with the Richmond Alumni Chapter. So just having the opportunity to get involved with the other alumni chapters post-graduation, that's allowed me to, encounter other Dukes and make those connections as well. So for me, it's just been getting involved with the different regional chapters and BAC as an alumni.
Excellent.
Hey, Jonathan.
I'd love to add to this, and kind of as we're wrapping up, when we speak about mentorship, I've been fortunate, since graduating that I've made connections with a number of alumni who've been instrumental in helping to guide my career through K-12 and into higher ed. But again, I'd be remiss, and I'm glad that he's out here with us tonight. But someone who was really, helpful to me when I was an undergrad, and really helped me to kind of find out who I am is Byron Bullock. Looking how he sort of navigated the spaces, as the director of multicultural affairs, in a time where there weren't very many Black administrators on JMU's campus. But yet he navigated the space. He was student-centered and student-focused, and he really helped us to realize that we could be successful, at Madison. And so I want to give a shout out to Byron. Thank you very much. I know I wouldn't be a director of multicultural affairs today, if it weren't for your leadership. So thank you so much for that. And thank you all panelists for just a fantastic evening, sharing your insights, your experiences. And we really start to see the common ground that we have, and that Madison is a truly special and unique place, and it will continue to be. And that it really becomes incumbent upon all of us to continue to give back and be that hope, that mentor, that sponsor, of current students, to let them know that they made the right choice. Dukes from day one, alumni for life. And so, Paula, I turn that over to you for the closing.
Real quick, Miss Annette, did you have something to say?
Yeah.
Too late.
Oh, sorry about that.
Something really important I wanted to add about being an ambassador. I'll take probably 45 seconds.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
definitely see myself as an ambassador, someone from the early 90s. And listening to what Owen said, it is about the numbers to some degree for me. I want there to be more African Americans. And I think if we take a stance of, trying to get to that place where, why wouldn't we want more representation on the campus? I would say it was easier to be an ambassador right after I graduated because everybody knew about that community. So it's not like we're trying to make it an HBCU, but I do want to say, like, let's talk it up. Let's get back to where there are more on the campus and it feels like a community, right? So I think to say, it's got to be the right fit. Sure, if they want an HBCU, it's not the same, but I just talk about the ROI of JMU. And the bottom line is, you think about the education, if you think about the resources, if you think about the beautiful campus, no matter what, we should all be promoting the institution. So we got to give truth in terms of what to expect. But if we continue to give a dialogue about what it's not, it's going to be hard to get it back to where it was. And I think that we should all, as alumni, want to, and we've got to make it marketable to African Americans. And to do that, that means we've got to kind of maybe go back a little bit and try and bring back some of the things that made us all want to come back and be so proud of our institution as alumni. So thank you for letting me put that plug in.
Well, I'm not sure how I can follow that, Annette. That was good. I want to say thank you, guys. I want to say thank you to the audience, to our fellow alums that are out there, and friends and family. I want to say thank you to the panelists. It was great dialogue, great conversation. I want to thank JMU Alumni Association for putting this on, for the leadership team of Black Alumni Chapter, for President Alger opening it up for us. If we did not get to any of your questions, feel free to reach out to the Alumni Association or to the Black Alumni Association, and we will get you the answer to what you're looking for. Did I miss anything? And I want to say happy anniversary to Dr. Johnson. Kudos, 50 years. Kudos, 50 years. So thank you. And I guess we can say, can we all unmute? It is homecoming week, so let's have a great homecoming week. If you haven't signed up for any of the activities, please do.
Wait.
So let's get ready. I'm gonna say JMU, and everybody else, I guess, go Dukes. Okay, are you ready? JMU.
Say go Dukes.
Go Dukes.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good one.
Right.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Hey.
Thank you, Paula.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.